Beneath the ancient banyan tree at the edge of the village, where a simple wedding hall was constructed of bamboo and wildflowers, Diep stood stunned in her modest wedding dress. Facing her wasn't the groom's smile, but the icy cold face of Mr. Huan. He tossed a stack of inheritance papers to the ground, right at Diep's bare feet. "If you cross this line, James will have nothing. Do you want him to be a poor woodcutter for the rest of his life because of your selfishness?" Diep choked with anger, her eyes blurring with tears, but her hands clutched her dress tightly, refusing to back down. James rushed forward from a distance, standing between his father and the woman he loved, his breath coming in ragged rage. The quiet of the village doesn't fade gently, it's ripped apart. A convoy of luxury cars storms down the dirt road, engines roaring so loudly that people nearby stop working and stare. Dust rolls across the yard in front of the woodshop. Then one car door opens. Mr. Hahn steps out first. He is dressed with the kind of precision that makes everyone around him feel smaller. Behind him come several lawyers in dark suits, each carrying folders, each wearing the same cold expression. They do not look like guests. They look like a force that came here to erase something. James immediately understands why his father is here. Not to bless, not to forgive, not even to talk. He came to take back what he believes is his son's future. Diep stands near the workshop entrance, still holding the cloth she had been using to wipe sawdust from the table. Her heart pounds the moment Mr. Hahn's eyes land on her. It is the kind of gaze that doesn't just judge, it strips you bare. "So this is the reason," he says, voice edged with disgust. "This is the girl my son threw everything away for." Every word that follows cuts deeper. He mocks her orphaned past. He attacks the life she came from. He calls her a burden, a mistake, a wall standing between James and the empire his family built over generations. His voice rises until the whole yard is forced to listen. "Look at him!" Mr. Hahn shouts, pointing at James. "Because of you, he stands here covered in dust and mud, wasting his life in this woodshop. Because of you, he lost a multi-billion-dollar timber empire." The villagers exchange uneasy glances. No one dares speak. Then Mr. Huan throws a file onto the table so hard it slides through a pile of wood shavings and stops in front of Diep. James opens it, jaw tightening instantly. It is a legal order freezing every asset in his name, every account, every investment, every remaining share, all locked down. It is not just pressure, it is punishment. Diep feels the air leave her chest. Her fingers tremble. She looks at James without knowing what to say. But before she can process anything, Mr. Hahn takes out something else, a blank check. He places it down slowly, deliberately, like a final insult meant to crush what little dignity she has left. "Write any number," he says. "Take it, leave, and disappear from my son's life forever." For a second, the world around Diep goes silent. Her eyes drift to James's hands. Hands that used to sign contracts now carry rough calluses. Hands that lift timber, repair shelves, build chairs, and fix broken doors. She looks at the little house beside the shop, humble and worn, nothing like the polished world James once belonged to. And then the worst thought slips into her heart. What if loving her really has ruined him? What if she is the reason he lost everything? The shame rises fast and merciless. Years of being looked down on, years of feeling lesser, years of knowing exactly how the rich speak to the poor when they think love is not enough. It all crashes back at once. For one painful moment, Diep wants to run. Not because she stopped loving James, but because she loves him so much she cannot bear being the reason he is humiliated. But James moves before that thought can swallow her whole. He steps in front of her, not hesitating, not wavering, not like a man cornered, like a man protecting what is his. He picks up the blank check, looks at it once, and tears it straight down the middle. The sound is small, but in the silence, it feels thunderous. He tears it again and again. Then he lets the pieces fall to the ground in front of his father. "Your money," James says, voice low and steady, "can buy businesses, land, fear, even loyalty. But it cannot buy 1 second of peace with her." Mr. Hahn's face hardens. "You think this is bravery?" he snaps. "I can tear this place down tomorrow. I can shut this workshop, ruin every supplier, and make sure every worker here loses their job. If you don't come back now, I will destroy everything around you." That lands differently, because this is no longer only about James and Diep. It is about the workers, the families, the people who survive because this little wood shop still breathes. The tension turns unbearable, and this time Diep does not stay behind James. She steps forward. Her legs are shaking, but Diep keeps walking until she stands face to face with the man who has been trying to crush her from the moment he arrived. Her voice trembles, but it does not break. "I may not have money," she says, lifting her chin, "but I have these hands, and with these hands I can build again." She picks up the worn ledger from the work table and holds it out. It is the management book James has been teaching her to keep, pages filled with orders, wages, repairs, and deliveries. Compared to Mr. Hahn's empire, it is small, but to Diep, it is proof that she has not just stood beside James. She has been learning how to carry the life they are building. "If you destroy this workshop," she says, meeting his eyes, "then James and I will start again from a single seedling, and if that seedling is cut down, we will plant another." The yard goes silent. Mr. Hahn stares at her. For the first time since arriving, he has no answer, because the girl he expected to frighten no longer exists. James looks at Diep, then reaches for her hand and grips it tightly. Not to save her, but to stand with her. In that moment, both of them are ready to lose everything, rather than surrender the life they chose together. Then a soft hand touches Mr. Hahn's shoulder. Mrs. Huyen steps forward and shows him a photo on her phone. James is laughing beside a wood fire, eyes bright, while Diep stands next to him smiling with flour on her cheek. The setting is simple, even messy, but his happiness is impossible to miss. It is a smile Mr. Hahn has not seen in years. Not in the mansion, not in boardrooms, not in all the polished family dinners money could buy. Something shifts in his face. The anger remains, but underneath it, something cracks. A truth he can no longer ignore. James was never running away from life. He was running toward it. Mr. Hahn exhales slowly, turns toward the car, then stops. "The wedding," he says quietly, "will still happen." For a heartbeat, nobody moves. Then the entire village erupts. The workers cheer, neighbors clap, older women wipe away tears. Children start running in circles because they know something wonderful has happened. The tension breaks into laughter, relief, and joy. The wedding is simple. No diamonds, no expensive champagne, no grand ballroom. Only wild sunflowers, homemade food, and the warmth of people who truly care. James stands before Diep, then kneels. In his hand is not a luxury ring, but one he carved himself from precious wood, smooth, polished, and filled with meaning no money could buy. Diep bursts into tears, not from shame, not from fear, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization that her worth was never tied to money, status, or approval. James slips the ring onto her finger, and the cheers rise again. Little Nee runs laughing through the crowd, and in that glowing village yard, it feels like love has finally won. But beyond the music, celebration, the forest remains dark, and from that darkness, John is still watching, silent, still, dangerous. While the village celebrates, he is already preparing something far crueler than anger revenge.
Dưới gốc đa cổ thụ, lễ cưới giản dị của Diệp và James bất ngờ bị phá vỡ khi ông Hoàng dẫn theo luật sư đến ngăn cản. Ông sĩ nghiệp Diệp đóng băng toàn bộ tài sản của James và ném túi xếp trắng yêu cầu cô rời đi. Trước áp lực và nỗi xấu hổ, Diệp suýt lung lay, nhưng James kiên quyết đứng ra bảo vệ cô, xé tấm séc và tuyên bố tiền bạc không thể mua được hạnh phúc của họ. Khi ông Hoàng đe dọa phá hủy xưởng gỗ và cuộc sống của mọi người, Diệp dũng cảm bước lên, khẳng định họ có thể bắt đầu lại từ hai bàn tay trắng. Sự kiên cường của cô cuối cùng của James hạnh phúc bên cô khiến ông Hoàng thay đổi. Cuối cùng ông chấp nhận để lễ cưới diễn ra. Cả ngôi làng vỡ hòa trong hạnh phúc, nhưng ở phía xa John vẫn âm thầm theo dõi.